Hi there, and welcome to this edition of NBCU Academy. It is a pleasure to see you all. My name is José Díaz-Balart, and today we're going to be talking about bilingual newsrooms across the NBC and Telemundo world and family. It's really an extraordinary thing to see how two languages that are spoken in the newsrooms are able to blend. Not talking about Spanglish. We're talking about two languages that are able to blend through our profession at Telemundo and NBC. It really is a fascinating thing that I hope that you'll be able to get some information on. And if you do speak more than one language, this is a perfect way of kind of finding out how to best utilize your resources, your gifts of speaking more than one language to further your profession. There's two extraordinary people that are colleagues of mine that I've worked with that I so much admire. Miguel Santiesteban, who is a correspondent at Telemundo Miami, and Lizbeth Licon, she is the managing editor of NBC and Telemundo in Dallas. Amigos, ¿qué tal? Qué gusto en verlos. ¿Cómo están?
Saludos, Jose. Saludos, Miguel. It's such a pleasure to join you and have an opportunity to talk about the duopoly, what we do, how we come together as a station as one. Es un placer. Saludos a todos.
Hi, Jose. Hi, Lizbeth. It's such a pleasure to be here in this panel, and I'm very excited to share with everybody who's on today.
You know, it's really, and as a, how do I say it, as an old guy, but in nice ways, as someone that's been seeing this evolution of journalism in the United States for some time, that's a good way of saying, estoy viejo y hace 30 años que estoy en esto. It's been really rewarding to see how Spanish has been included into the national conversation in the United States. And that's something that is relatively new, but it's really extraordinary to see. And I'm just thinking, Lizbeth, let me start with you. I mean, what is the relationship between local NBC, Telemundo stations, and how do they work together, and how have they been able to blend?
It all comes down to synergy. In reality, it's important for everyone to know that we are one station, we are one team. And the advantage that we have is instead of having, one station with 5 troops, we have 10 because, combining both resources and talent and resources out in the streets, it gives us more of an opportunity to be in more places than one, which puts us ahead of the competition. I would like to share one of those examples, which, occurred here yesterday in Dallas. Major explosion. 8 people hurt, firefighters, civilians. And so, all hands on deck, of course, as every other station would go out and dispatch, the different crews out to respond to this major breaker. The difference with a duopoly with NBC and Telemundo is that our resources are everywhere. And we're able to be in multiple places. And the beauty of the duopoly and the synergy is that we can have our Telemundo talent as well as our NBC talent be on each other's air and, have additional sources and just get additional elements that, not every other station's able to do. So it definitely gives us a higher up right there.
Yeah, but tell me how that works in situ. In other words, in an experience or in a breaking news story. How exactly does that work? How do they balance each other out, and how are one or the other chosen to be on?
Right. So in the example of yesterday, the breaker came out. And so, we start moving our crews. And so, in one of the scenes, we had some NBC crews out there, and the first reporter that was out there was, one of our Telemundo reporters. So we have to manage as far as, getting, a reporter on the air, not only just for Telemundo because it's a Telemundo reporter, but also on the NBC air, and being able to do both. And then fast forward to later in the afternoon where everyone's on air. It's 4 p.m. Everyone's positioned. And guess what? We got a surprise like we do on any type of breaking news, and especially a big coverage story like this one. And so knowing that my NBC reporter was going to be live at the top of the 4, I knew that my other Telemundo reporter was going to be live until 4:30. So guess what? We powered up their camera, and we were able to, the only station here locally, to get the live feed with the latest information on both stations with the use of the Telemundo photographer. So that's the beauty of it.
Interesting. Miguel, how is it transferred into you? How does it translate? Not idiomas translation, but rather how does it translate to you when you're doing your job?
Well, it's really interesting what Lizbeth was saying, because yesterday I was working actually with an NBC6 Miami photo. He speaks both English and Spanish, and we were short on staff, and they needed someone from NBC to help me. And it's really amazing to have to be able to work with Telemundo photos. But one day that we need help from NBC, we get the NBC photo to help us. I went to the scene and we met with the NBC Miami crew, and what was amazing, they already had gotten the PIO, the speaker for the police department in Spanish for us. So that for me as a reporter to have somebody you're saying double up that power, that just makes NBC and Telemundo and our crews so much more powerful than other stations, because we have that support in between the two of us. So you get to a station, Telemundo gets sound in Spanish, if I'm working as a reporter, but we also get sound in English. We make sure that our NBC sister station have that sound, have that video, have whatever they need to make it happen at the end. So that makes both Telemundo and NBC much more powerful.
Yeah, Lizbeth, it's got to be like, I think, a change of culture in our newsrooms when Miguel goes out, he's working for Telemundo Canal 51 Miami, pero a la vez él tiene que estar pensando en sus colegas, nuestros colegas de NBC, NBC6, en el caso del sur de la Florida, y hacer también entrevistas en inglés. In other words, it's an interesting, because there's got to be a culture change, I think, in our newsrooms, Lizbeth, about when our reporters go out, and Miguel may be going out for Channel 51 in Miami to a scene like he was just describing, and he's got to be doing his job of the day, but also thinking about colleagues in English and getting English sound bites. That works kind of both ways, but it does have to have a culture change, right?
Absolutely. And, as far as the culture and, looking out for one another, that's the most important thing. And that culture already exists. And so in the example of Miguel going out, of course, he's, hustling to get his, interviews and his coverage. But the culture already exists where we're going to be watching out for one another. And so if there's someone that, maybe Miguel is interviewing una persona latina, pero que habla inglés, le va a preguntar, porque es como nos echamos la mano a cada día, no importa si es un breaker grandísimo, or if it's es una GA story. En realidad, nosotros nos movemos como uno. And I think that we've shown that as moving as one and working together. And that's the beauty of it. And so if we're not, helping each other out and not getting those interviews in English and in Spanish, and we're at the same location or different locations, we're doing something wrong. But, for the most part, I want to say that every team member here is always going to look out for either English or Spanish. And again, the maximizing of resources and able to do that, to divide and conquer. And I want everybody to remember those words, divide and conquer, because that's really what a duopoly is doing every day, no matter if it's a GA story or a big breaker.
Yeah, and this goes all the way from the local level all the way to the network level. And there's a very good reason why this is so profound and so real. And it's called Cesar Conde. The chairman of news for NBCU. And he has instituted these policies that really help all of us become much more involved in our profession. Here's an example. Just recently, thanks to the leadership of Cesar Conde, Telemundo Network News and NBC News have gotten together to put on stories about our community that are done by two correspondents, one from Noticias Telemundo, one from NBC Nightly News, and they do that story exactly the same way in English at 6:30 on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt, and it airs at the same exact time at 6:30 on Noticias Telemundo. Here's an example of some of that.
NBC News kicking off a unique collaboration with our Spanish language sister network, Telemundo.
Covering issues affecting the Hispanic community in America, with reports running in Spanish and English on both networks.
Here along the border, some families are crossing south into Mexico in search of cheaper treatment, which is where we find our colleague at Telemundo, Julio Vaquero, who saw this firsthand. That's right, Gary. With more than a third of the Rio Grande population uninsured, many come here looking for medical treatment and medicines that can be much cheaper.
Isa Gutiérrez nos da más detalles. Adelante, Isa.
Gracias, Nicole. Nos encontramos en Winter Park, Florida, justo al norte de Orlando.
The people of Cuba are making their voices heard in ways they've never dared before. Their mantra, patria y vida, country and life.
So 3 weeks ago, he was exposed to coronavirus. Somebody came over to his house, tested positive right after. He decided not to get tested because he's scared of testing positive and not being able to go to work and make money for his family.
Por cierto, quien nos trae todos esos detalles es nuestra colega Morgan Bradford de NBC News desde Nueva York. Muy buenos días, Morgan.
Ay, buenos días, mi gente linda, ¿cómo están?
How do you help those students who need that social, in-person interaction to thrive? That's what our Telemundo colleague, Nicole Suarez, went to find out.
That's right, Morgan. About 700,000 special needs students here in the U.S. are also English language learners, leaving many immigrant parents to provide speech, occupational, and behavioral therapy at home.
You know, it lets us be who we are and speak about and for those people that are like us. I love the Morgan Radford part when she's in English. Well, you know, my colleague, and then in Spanish, "Ay, linda gente, ¿cómo están?" Because it's all part of who we are, right? We just have so many emotions and so many sensitivities, sensibilities. Miguel, a question I have for you is, you know, what about those that have, let's say, an accent in their second language? It could be someone who speaks primarily Spanish and has an accent in English, or someone who speaks primarily English and has an accent in Spanish. How is that a factor in, for example, what you do?
Muy buena pregunta, Jose, and that's a very personal question for me because I came to the United States 8 years ago from Colombia. I was born in Colombia. Soy colombiano 100%. So English is a second language for me. This is my third market with Telemundo. I started working in Hartford, Connecticut with both NBC and Telemundo. Then I went to work at NBC 10 Boston and Telemundo Nueva Inglaterra. And, you know, from the first day, that was like a question I had. You know, I do have an accent. I went to school in English. But you know, Telemundo and NBC, the company, NBC Universal, is so welcoming to help you, you know, better work on your accent. And also, you know, for what many, you know, think is not possible, my breakthrough to the English market. And that was really, you know, the first year that I started working with NBC Connecticut. I went live one day. They told me, Miguel, we know you speak English, so we want you to take, you know, we have a special program. We want you to come and report, you know, and it was a story about the Hispanic heritage in Hartford. So that was even more personal and for me to be able to report that in English for the community in Connecticut. So that example, that was my first, you know, English report. And, you know, you always had that on your head. Oh, I have an accent. Is it going to be a problem? And it was an obstacle for me when I was trying to break in the TV industry. But NBC Universal, you know, with open arms, open the company for me, and also the English market, which for me means a lot because, you know, as a reporter, you want to be able to show your culture, your background as a Latino, como un hispano, but also be able to show your abilities that you learn when you came to the United States. So for students who might be listening right now, and you came from a Latino country and English is your second language, it is possible. You can do it. NBC Universal will help you, will guide you through it to work through your accent. And the accent is just, it's just a barrier that nowadays, NBC Universal is not letting. We have many correspondents, many reporters across the country who are doing it. I am an example. I did it in Hartford. I did it in Boston. So it's such a blessing for the people who were born here in the United States and have Latino families, Hispanic families, and they speak Spanish because they grew up speaking Spanish, and might have a little bit of fear. I have some colleagues who have called me and told me, oh my God, help me. I want to practice my Spanish to be able to, I have some friends as well at NBC6 in Miami who have called me, how do I say this? ¿Cómo digo esto en español, Miguel? And we're all together working on this, but it is possible, it is happening. And if you're a student just starting in this industry, you can do it. I did it. It is possible.
No, and look, I'd like to say it's important that all of us, regardless of the language or languages we speak, cultivamos nuestra profundidad del vocabulario. We cultivate the profundity, the depth of our vocabulary, and perfect our accent in whatever language you're talking about. Lizbeth, is there a difference in the coverage when you send out crews and correspondence reporters to go to different areas? Is there a difference in the coverage between, a correspondent or anchor that speaks two languages versus one who doesn't?
It's definitely an advantage when you are able to speak, English and bilingual, español, inglés. Sí es algo que ayuda mucho. I do think that there is a difference in the sense of, maybe cómo hablarle a la gente, cómo llegar a la gente. Tal vez una persona que hable o tenga más la tranquilidad de hablar español, sabe cómo hablarle a la gente de lo que es su comunidad. Y por esa razón, I do think that, it does help out a lot. And, the value of understanding both cultures. En mi caso, yo crecí en la frontera, hablando español en la casa, speaking English at school. And so understanding, both, what it is in the general market per se, and then also lo que es en la comunidad latina, las necesidades. So entendiendo esas dos cosas, y esas dos áreas, lo que nos afecta a nosotros, it definitely puts you at an advantage point. Absolutely. Pero es manejar y hablarle a la gente que se te va a hacer más fácil para hacer esa conexión.
Yeah. Miguel, what would you say to people that are watching us that do have that, I don't know, call it a fear, call it a little trepidation about, I have an accent in Spanish or in English, and what are the steps you take? What would you say to them?
Well, first of all, you gotta be open about it. I think, if you're interviewing for a job at NBC, I did, I told my current and my former bosses, hey, I do have an accent. I want to work on it, and I want to be on air in English. I have said it in every market, but the company is so open, and like I said, they really invest in you. And if you need training, if you need coaching, they will work with you. And they have worked with me in the past to better my accent, to better my speech and my delivery. So for the people who have that fear, my invitation for you is to not have it, because this is a company that values who you are. This is a company that values your accent, where you come from, what language you speak. And so what I would say is find help. You got Jose, you got me, you got Lizbeth, and so many journalists who do this both in English and Spanish. And if you want to get advice, we're open to help you. And talk to your news directors, to your assistant news directors, your producers. The duopolies that we have, across the country, in Boston, Connecticut, Miami, Dallas, everywhere that we have, they're really looking for those journalists who speak both English and Spanish. So they're waiting for you. So if you speak español, si hablas inglés, the only thing is for you to raise your hand, because the company is waiting for you to help you and to break if it's in English or in Spanish.
Yeah, and Lizbeth, there are there internships, etc., things that can help those that are interested?
Absolutely. There's internships, and if you're able to, get in the door, that is the best way, because you're able to learn the different hats, the different areas, and, just come in with an open mind. If, there's something that you want to learn, and maybe you're thinking that you want to be a reporter, but once you come in, that can definitely change. It's happened to many of my colleagues where they're thinking they were going to start off being, like I said, maybe an anchor, a reporter, but hey, there's other areas that, folks don't really know about. There's the assignment desk, there's, MOC, production. And so once you get in the door, you have the opportunity to take everything in, learn about the different areas, and, maybe you keep on track, but it's an opportunity to help you identify what you want to do for the rest of your life, an opportunity to be coached by many professionals that, want to help you do good. And that's why we're here. Even a new employee that comes in or an intern, we want to make sure that we set you up for success. En inglés y en español lo hacemos alegremente.
It's interesting because I'm thinking I've been doing this for 37 years, right? Every day on television, either in English or in Spanish, or sometimes like now in both languages. And I still screw up. Just today on my José Díaz-Balart Reports show on MSNBC that I'm privileged to be able to have, I had to talk about Britney Spears' conservatorship. Y esa palabra no me salió. There's no way I could say conservatorship on the air. So I just stopped. I said conservatorship. And then I kept talking. It's always a challenge because the more you know, the more things can get confusing sometimes. So, Miguel, what would you say to people that say, I can do this. Why don't I just start on both languages? When I think it's important that we really take this very seriously. The opportunity and the privilege of being able to do your profession and carry out your profession in two different languages. Miguel, también hay unas responsabilidades muy importantes que nosotros tenemos que asumir en cuanto a cuando pedimos que nos den la oportunidad, asegurarnos que estemos actuando como Dios manda, ¿no? I mean, that when we get the opportunity to do our profession and serve our profession in two languages, we have to make sure, Miguel, that we are very seriously taking that opportunity and that privilege and really preparing.
And, I've always said, journalism, being a journalist, a reporter, an anchor, this is a public service. We serve the community, and that commitment, is bigger when, your station gives you the opportunity. They call you because it's usually how it happens. Or you say, hey, I want to do this. So the commitment is much bigger, and that takes a lot of, preparation. That takes a lot of, extra hours, practicing. But, that it is important that the first you focus on what you're best at, I would say. Perhaps, my Spanish is better. I was born in Colombia. Hablo español mucho mejor que el inglés. Entonces, it's important to perfect, to perfection what you know better. So once you have that down, and you feel like, okay, I can take that step, to report both in English and Spanish, with many of us, want to do every day, then you do it. But you have to make sure that you're doing it right in one language to be able to do it right in the other language, and maybe in a everyday basis or in a weekly basis, report both in English and Spanish. But why so important? Because we're public servants, and once we're taking that role of reporting in English, or if I'm an English reporter to report in Spanish, I want to be able to communicate well to my audience. So it's very important to prepare.
Lizbeth, what would you say?
I think that si tenemos una responsabilidad muy grande, we have a really big responsibility, a commitment with our audience, and echarle ganas and make sure that, like you said, we're still going to make mistakes, and, you just own up to it, and you keep going and you keep moving. And whether, you're integrating into, want to start off with Telemundo or you want to start off with NBC, make sure that you keep, your mind open, because if you are bilingual, to be part of something so big like a duopoly where you have an opportunity to report in English, y en español, and do it alongside, both teams, and get your story out there to two very different audiences. I mean, that is such a really big deal. So, a continuar a darle ganas, porque es lo que hacemos todos los días. Tenemos la responsabilidad, y the best part of it is que lo hacemos en inglés y en español, so we reach more people. That's the beauty of the duopoly.
There's some bilingual reporting courses now, I understand, in academia.
There are. And I think that's great.
Yeah. I'd like to just, as we wrap it up, I know, Miguel, I just want your thoughts on, even though you're relatively young and you're at the beginning of a very successful career, which makes us all very proud, Miguel. What would you like to tell that young kid that for the first time had dreams and hopes of one day serving in the United States, serving as a journalist, and serving as a Latino in the most extraordinary country on earth? What would you like to tell that kid today?
I literally just made a video for Hispanic Heritage Month saying, I had, more than 8 years ago to come to the United States to become a journalist, to become a bilingual.
Perfect place to have a pause, because we need to get back on that, because that's a very important statement that he's going to give us. But Lizbeth, let me ask you, what would you tell that young girl in La Frontera growing up that she should think about and know?
To, keep on going, keep on believing. I think that, family is your foundation, y si es oportunidad de poder hablar el español en la casa, el inglés, de darle adelante. And, for those that, are in a Latino household and maybe el español no se habla tanto, try to do your part. Habla un poquito más de español, échale ganas. Y si no es en la casa, con los abuelitos, con las mamás, en la escuela, porque es una cosa muy importante. And look at us now, this conversation that we're having, it's so important, vital in every profession, specifically ours.
Yeah, no, and there's always, you can always work on your Spanish by, for example, checking out Julio Vaquero at 6:30, 5:30 Central every day at Noticias Telemundo. Miguel, you are the consummate professional. You gave us a moment of pause through technology that left us on the edge of our seats. It was a perfect tease to pause. But tell me what you wrote just this month.
Yeah, I was just saying, more than 8 years ago, I had a dream to come to the United States to become a journalist, and once to get here to become a bilingual journalist. It was always my dream. I got here, I came here, I went to school, and from the beginning, I always try. So for students, it's very important, if you're Latino or if you're not, if you're interested into learning Spanish or another language, since you're in college, you've got to change your mentality. And that's what I did. Once I went to college, I started, I had a radio show, and it was called Spanglish. So, I said, welcome to Spanglish. Hola, ¿cómo están? It was, I made that my mentality. I want to be a bilingual reporter when I graduate. And that's what I did. I went to internships. Take note. It's important that you look for internships. And once you do your internship, that you have a demo, a reel, both in English and Spanish. I did that. And that, folks, that helped me reach my dream. What I thought it was impossible more than 10 years ago. Now we're here. I'm at NBC Universal, so it is possible, but you gotta work for it. You gotta change your mentality. You gotta change that ship, and start thinking both in English and Spanish. Like Jose said the other day, he wakes up, thinking both languages. So that's what you need to do. And again, I'm gonna say everything is possible, but you gotta be persistent and determined. I've always said that with persistence and determination, you can reach out your goals. And this company, NBC Universal, will help you and will guide you through it.
And Lizbeth, how proud are you that you are able to express yourself through your profession, which is una vocación de servicio, right? The vocation of service, that you're able to express yourself, all of the aspects of yourself that make us unique in this world. How proud are you that you're able to do that?
Honestly, I'm very proud, and I'm so happy that, growing up in a Latino household, that my parents, that I had an opportunity to learn both languages simultaneously, as many households, as many of my childhood friends did. And, I'm so grateful for that, because, speaking en inglés y en español y en inglés definitely gave me the opportunity to be in a position where I can guide the reporters, the crews in los dos idiomas, in two languages, and still have that foundation And it may be, different sound bites or, different ways of telling the story, but with the same foundation. And my foundation of having my, Hispanic heritage, being a Latina and, coming along this way where, being bilingual has definitely helped me. And I see that this is the future. And, whether it's, like Miguel mentioned, if it's Spanish or another language, take advantage of it, because as our company, we're universal and storytelling is universal. En veces, no se entiende el inglés o el español, pero el corazón con una historia se cuenta todo.
Y tienes tanto mérito, Lizbeth, que te criaste en este país y que sin embargo has podido mantener y perfeccionar el castellano y puedes de esta forma servir a nuestra comunidad con tanta lucidez como tienes. And I've got to just, if I could just, we have to wrap this chat up. I would love to continue speaking with you. And I really would like for all of you to know that here at NBC Universal, Telemundo, NBC, there are avenues for you to really have a future that includes the best parts of your past, of your parents and your grandparents, and to see that we are able to continue to grow, to polish the things that we need to polish more, and to work. Just one quick thing. I was speaking with Gotti Schwartz and a few chats ago right here at NBCU Academy. You know what? It's not good enough just to speak abuela Spanish. You have to perfect your Spanish. Perfecciona el castellano. Lee en español. Escribe en español. Mira Telemundo y perfecciona tu castellano. And the same goes for those of you who speak Spanish mostly. Perfect your English. I always tell young people, don't binge on TV shows. Binge on studying. Binge on reading. Binge on understanding. And binge on serving your community. It is, Miguel and Lizbeth, it's really been a pleasure to speak with you. Nos da a nosotros mucha ilusión ver a uno de ustedes triunfar en sus vidas, en sus carreras, gracias a NBCU y Telemundo. Thank you both for being with me today.
Un placer y un orgullo.
Un placer, muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. NBCU Academy, what a great avenue. You see, here are the things that we're able to do thanks to NBCU, NBCU Academy, and the greater Telemundo NBCU family. Thank you for the privilege of your time. And we'll see you in both English, in Spanish, whatever language you perfect, you can use it. Cuídense mucho.